After endless delays, document mishaps, and procedural maneuvers, Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee into General Mkhwanazi's allegations has finally kicked off. It was a bumpy start this morning all the way to the afternoon, but the evidence is now finally flowing. What have we learned? Let's find out. Fam, I just want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's episode, Pace Car Rental. Use promo code SMWX and make sure you show Pace some love as they're showing this channel some love. Now, let's get into the episode. Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, fam. Today, Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee into Mkhwanazi's allegations finally began its hearings. And, well, let's just say it didn't exactly start with a bang, but after a 6-hour delay on a procedural issue, the evidence is finally flowing. In fact, the committee is still going on, but I'm going to take a pit stop, break down what's happened up to today, and I'll be back later tomorrow to keep you updated with all the summaries that I know you're all enjoying following so much. And thank you so much for the tremendous support in following this work. So, couple of things that I want to talk about today to summarize everything for you and interpret it. First, explain the delay, what caused the 6-hour stoppage. Then, to get into what I think are the two main areas of Mkhwanazi's testimony so far that really stand out. Mr. Nkabinde, the Chief of Staff, Cedrick Nkabinde, Chief of Staff of Senzo Mchunu, and why he emerged as an important character in today's testimony. And then, General Khumalo, who was testifying at the Madlanga Commission before he fell ill and the commission was postponed. Remember, he's the crime intelligence boss. So we learned things about both of these figures which teach us more about the Political Killings Task Team and why there were efforts to disband it. Let me start then with exactly why we had this delay today. And I must begin by saying this. South Africa in this ad hoc committee up to now has been entertained to a series of irrelevancies, blockages, and stoppages in this committee's work. It's really been unacceptable how this committee, right from its inception, has dragged its feet, taken procedural points, how members have argued and bickered with each other over things that may be relevant to them politically but are irrelevant to South Africans and finding the truth. And so today's stoppage and blockage, for those of us who have been following this committee and watching every one of its hearings, fell within a broader pattern. So we can talk about the merits of the particular stoppage today, but the fact of the matter is it's just the latest in a long line of consistent delay in this committee, which is just strange because the one thing South Africans agree on is they want these MPs to get to the truth. They will reward any politician who just shows that they care about getting to the truth. So let's just go back a bit, because I was shocked to realize that the first sitting of this committee, never mind when it was established, was on the 5th of April. More than 2 months ago, and really one has to ask what has been achieved in these 2 months. We had long sittings that were delayed and deferred about the terms of reference. Then we had long sittings to decide whether or not there would be a witness list. Then there were meetings about the witness list, and that was kicked forward. And by the way, throughout this, the MPs were coming in from their cars, not putting on their cameras, some of them coming in late on multiple occasions. It wasn't even clear whether they were in the meeting half the time. So, yeah, there was just a general attitude of chill, which shocked me. I've heard about how Parliament can be very chilled and not serious, but looking at this committee really opened my eyes to how unseriously some members take their responsibilities. But anyway, finally, last Friday, we had a preparatory meeting for the hearings where everything that needed to be cleared before we could start hearing the evidence should have been cleared. And in that meeting, the evidence leaders also said that although there had been a delay in getting the witness statement from General Mkhwanazi, they had sent it to members in that meeting on Friday. So we know they had that witness statement from at least Friday. So fast forward to today, the committee meeting starts, and suddenly there is a problem with the witness statement. Let's have a look, because Julius Malema probably articulated the concern best.
The senior counsel can't say that. Can't say the first statement to us is supplementary statement. That coming from a senior counsel. That the first statement you make is called supplementary statement. What law are you teaching people? It's unacceptable, and we can't help them, Chair, to cure it here in front of cameras. He has to go back and do the right thing. Because even if General Mkhwanazi says, this is my statement to Parliament, but what is written on this thing is supplementary statement. You can't change it.
So, again, let's get to the merits of today, because it is material if an affidavit isn't signed, at least before court. Parliamentary rules add a bit of complexity in there, but that's material, and you wouldn't call an opening statement a supplementary statement, which is fine, except my overall problem is not with Julius Malema's concern, it's with the overall process of this committee. They had a whole meeting on Friday to iron out these questions, which was already 2 months since they started. So for the committee, whoever's fault it was that the documents that are presented haven't had their I's dotted and the T's crossed, is just unacceptable for everyone involved, because everyone needs to take ownership in the committee actually moving speedily. But my further problem is that it took 6 hours to resolve this problem, and the committee went into a closed hearing to fix the problems with the affidavit. I have absolutely no idea on what basis they took that decision. We saw Parliament when the VAT increase was being discussed in a finance committee, keeping the media out of that committee as well. And it's becoming a trend in Parliament that when uncomfortable discussions need to be had, they kick the media out and the public can't see it anymore. So I don't know why that deliberation was secret. And I'm not sure why it took nearly 6 hours to change the title of the affidavit, to change the ambiguity away from it being supplementary to being just a witness statement, or signing the pages. Because ultimately, it would be ridiculous to expect General Mkhwanazi to come up with all new witness statements. And it would actually be a problem if his statements deviated from the ones he gave before the Matlanga Commission. So there will inevitably be overlap between the statements. And in the interests of time, Parliament will have to make use of statements that have been used before. Of course, parts that may be relevant to Parliament's terms of reference would be changed, which is why there are specific witness statements for Parliament. But there's nothing wrong to referring back to a previous affidavit, which is exploring very similar issues. And by the way, that might happen at the Matlanga Commission, because sometimes Parliament might interview a witness first, and the Matlanga Commission might get them later, and I would expect the same thing to happen. So while this issue may well have been material, I'm still not sure why it took Parliament so long to fix it, because it would have been a very easy fix. Change the references in the document, sign the pages, change the title, and we move. And quite frankly, this should have been done offline. And I'm also not sure, because the MPs would have got this document quite a long time ago. At least we know on Friday. So one would have hoped that they could have resolved these issues with the team offline so that we could get to the hearings. Anyway, be that as it may, after 6 hours of delay, on top of 2 months of delay, we finally have the evidence flowing, and that's what I want to get into now. So a couple of interesting things. Firstly, the character of Cedrick Nkabinde, the chief of staff of Senzo Mchunu, who, remember, is the minister who is now on gardening leave because he has been implicated by General Mkhwanazi. The chief of staff is a very close political aide to a minister, and what emerged in the questioning of Mkhwanazi as the committee opened to really get to the evidence is that Mkhwanazi actually had a relationship, or knew Nkabinde from Nkabinde's time at IPID, which is a body within the police that kind of watches over what the rest of the police is doing. And he even went with Nkabinde, interestingly, to visit Senzo Mchunu at Nkabinde's invitation I believe, just as he had become Minister of Police, but according to Mkhwanazi, that was like a meet and greet where they kind of got to know each other. Now, interestingly, Nkabinde becomes important because he seems to have been the link, firstly, between Brown Mokgotsi and Mkhwanazi. So because Mkhwanazi had a relationship with Nkabinde, when it emerged to Mkhwanazi that Brown Mokgotsi was a senior or a serious figure in all that he alleged, he actually asked Nkabinde for Mokgotsi's number, and that's how Mkhwanazi got Mokgotsi's number. So Nkabinde also knew Mokgotsi, and he was chief of staff of the minister. Now, furthermore, Mkhwanazi did not put this at a high level of evidentiary proof, but what he said, because he was asked, and he said, look, you've asked me, so I'm under oath, is that according to him, the way that Nkabinde knew Mchunu is that when Senzo Mchunu, the Minister of Police, is on gardening leave, when he was the Premier of KZN, long before he became Police Minister, apparently there was some case that he was involved in or implicated in. But Nkabinde met with Mchunu, and well, Mchunu was no longer implicated in the case, and according to Mkhwanazi, that was where they met, and that's where their relationship was solidified. So that's quite interesting, because I've never heard of a case that Mchunu was involved in while he was Premier of KZN. But again, this is effectively hearsay, because it's Mkhwanazi saying he heard it from someone. But nonetheless, Mchunu or people should be asked about this to see if this really is true and corroborated. And I'm sure when Nkabinde comes to the commission, who should also get his chance to put his version across, he'll be asked about that. So it's very clear that the figure of Nkabinde has now taken on a new importance in this, as the person who was mediating between Mkhwanazi, Brown Mokgotsi, who also has a direct relationship with the minister, and who will be a key witness, and we need to understand what he knows, what he doesn't know, and if some of Mkhwanazi's allegations hold up under his questioning. Interestingly, Mkhwanazi said this thing a bit later in his testimony, where he said the letter which Mchunu wrote to try to disband the task team that Mkhwanazi was leading was not written by Mchunu. So there seems to be this narrative developing that there were forces pressuring Mchunu to disband, and Mchunu maybe wasn't fully aware of exactly why there was so much pressure on him to disband this task team. Nomaan Arendse, the advocate and evidence leader, SC, asked an interesting question, because in that letter that Mchunu sent, which disbanded the task team, there were actually three things that happened. There was the freezing of posts in crime intelligence, there was something related to border management, and there was the disbandment of the political killings task team. And Arendse said, actually, if you put all those three things together, they do seem to be unrelated, but actually they could relate to all kinds of criminality, because the border is where illicit flows can happen of drugs, of trafficking. Of course, crime intelligence is very fundamental to crime fighting, especially organized crime, and then the political killings task team. So was there an initiative to make all these three things come together so that some outside force could benefit from all three of those things? So that was interesting. The next interesting thing that happened was related to Khumalo, and this is the last theme that I'll touch on. Mkhwanazi said that Khumalo was involved in such an important operation, he didn't specify exactly what the operation was, that this went beyond just the police. This was a full-on intelligence and even military-related operation. And when he was arrested, he was in the middle of this operation. He maintains that the arrest of Dumisani Khumalo had nothing to do with this HR complaint within crime intelligence, where someone was appointed who wasn't properly vetted, but rather it had to do, and he called it a project. This was a project to divert the political killings task team, Dumisani Khumalo himself, from closing in on the work and the progress they were making in terms of unmasking the criminal syndicate, which Mkhwanazi alleges they were very close to unmasking. So he went further into IDAC, which was the body that arrested Khumalo. This is a body that came out of new legislation to create an anti-corruption entity inside the criminal justice system, which really focuses on corruption and avoiding state capture again. And Mkhwanazi says that, in his view, this organization has split in two. There are good people working in this organization. He mentioned someone like Andrea Johnson, who leads it, other good people, but he says that there is a rogue or nefarious element, and that rogue or nefarious element is hell-bent on getting Khumalo out of this project that he is undertaking in terms of this criminal syndicate. So we got a bit more detail on exactly Mkhwanazi's view on IDAC, why he believes Khumalo was arrested, and also the kind of high-level operations that Khumalo was involved in. So it's clear there are two versions. IDAC insists that they arrested Khumalo because he breached labor laws, and of course labor laws and crime intelligence matter because you can't just have anyone getting access to intelligence, right? So the people who are appointed to crime intelligence, that is a serious thing. Mkhwanazi maintains, no. He insists this was a project to remove Khumalo and the Political Killings Task Team from doing the work they were doing, closing in on these criminal syndicates. Tomorrow is going to be really interesting. Goodness knows what time this thing's going to finish tonight, but tomorrow, at least according to the schedule laid out on Friday, we are finally going to hear from MPs. And I'm truly interested to see how MPs finally get to this. And I want to see their questions. I want to see Glynis Breitenbach's questions, even ANC questions. How's the ANC going to approach this? I'd like to see Julius Malema, of course, and the EFF, and MK as well. So it's going to be, and Action SA, the alternates, we'll see how that all pans out. So tomorrow should be very interesting. I hope that we have finally got past all the procedural hiccups and we can now move towards consistent days of evidence, because that's what South Africa so desperately needs. Let's get consistent hearings, consistent insights, so that we can unearth the truth through the voices of these MPs, these advocates, and these witnesses. And then hopefully next week, when the Madlanga Commission kicks off again, we'll actually have two different processes running in parallel, and finally we'll get not just a drip, but a full-on waterfall of evidence. And for that, SMWX will have your back. We'll be right there. Make sure you watch our live streams of the committee and the commission, and keep it locked right here on SMWX. Thank you for your likes, your shares, your subscriptions, and for riding with us. And we'll see you one more time on the next one tomorrow. Aye.